You know that feeling when you catch your reflection, and for a split second, you don't recognize the person looking back? I'm not talking about the physical changes we all expect. The aging, the new lines around the eyes, or the way our clothes fit differently. I'm talking about the expression behind the glass. It's the hardness in the jaw that didn't used to be there. It's the way the light seems to have been pulled out of your eyes, replaced by a gaze that is always scanning, always waiting, always bracing for the next shoe to drop. You remember who you used to be, don't you? You can almost reach back and touch the memory of that version of yourself. Maybe you were softer then. Maybe you were someone who trusted easily, who laughed without checking to see if it was safe first. Someone who moved through the world with a certain lightness that felt like second nature. Now, you're looking at this new version of yourself, and it feels like looking at a stranger who moved into your house while you were sleeping. You see the ways you've changed, and often the first thing you feel isn't compassion, it's resentment. You look at your new habits, your tendency to withdraw from people you love, your sudden irritability, or the way you over-prepare for every tiny interaction, and you think, I hate what I've become. You feel like a broken version of a masterpiece. You might even feel like you've betrayed that younger, more hopeful version of yourself. It feels like you lost a war you didn't even know you were fighting. And this stranger is the only thing left standing in the ruins. But here is the truth we often miss when we are blinded by that self-dislike. That stranger in the mirror isn't a failure. That stranger is a survivor. The hardness in your jaw, that was your body's way of holding itself together when everything else was falling apart. The scanning eyes, that was your brain trying to ensure you'd never be caught off guard again. Every part of this new you that you find so difficult to love was actually forged in a fire you didn't ask to walk through. You didn't choose to become guarded. You were taught that being open was dangerous. You didn't choose to be difficult or anxious. You were adapted by circumstances that required you to be hyper-aware just to keep going. When we look at ourselves through the lens of trauma, we tend to see a list of defects. We see the social exhaustion and call it laziness. We see the emotional numbness and call it being cold. We see the need for control and call it being a perfectionist. But if we peel back those labels, we see something much more profound. We see a human being who did exactly what they needed to do to stay alive. We see a mind that is incredibly loyal to our survival. Before we can even talk about the how of changing or healing, we have to pause and acknowledge why that stranger in the mirror exists in the first place. We have to stop looking at our reflection as a disappointment and start looking at it as a map. Every unlikable trait is a landmark of a place you've been and a thing you've endured. It is so easy to love the version of ourselves that had it easy. It's much harder and much more necessary to find a way to sit in the room with this new, complicated, tired person and say, I see you. I see how hard you've been working to keep us safe. This isn't about liking the damage. It's about beginning to recognize that the person you've become is actually a testament to your own strength. You aren't a stranger to yourself because you're lost. You're a stranger because you've been to a frontier that changed you. And that person, as weary and guarded as they might be, is the only one who can lead you back to a place of peace. We often mistake our survival mechanisms for our personality. If you find yourself overthinking every text message, rereading a simple hello for hidden meanings, or scanning a room for exits the moment you walk in, you might tell yourself you're just anxious or difficult. You might even start to believe that you are inherently broken or too much for people to handle. But these aren't personality flaws. They are blueprints of protection. They are the intricate, invisible structures your mind built when the world felt like it was crumbling. Think back to a time when you felt completely overwhelmed, when the floor beneath you vanished and you had nowhere to turn. In those moments, your mind and your body did something incredible. They adapted. They didn't wait for permission. They simply went to work. They built walls of silence to keep people at a distance. They built watchtowers of hyper-vigilance so you could see trouble coming from miles away. They created the architecture of protection, a fortress designed to ensure that whatever hurt you once could never reach that deep, soft center of yours again. As Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Right now, you might feel like you are nothing more than the sum of those walls. You might look at your life and see only the barriers you've put up between yourself and others. You see the no you say to invitations, the walls of irony or humor you use to deflect real intimacy, and the way you pull back just when someone gets close. It's easy to feel claustrophobic inside your own defense systems. It's easy to resent the very structures that are keeping you safe because they also keep you lonely. But we have to look at these walls with a different kind of eyes. Imagine you were caught in a violent, freezing storm. You would build a shelter out of whatever was available: stones, mud, broken branches. It wouldn't be a palace. It might be cramped, dark, and uncomfortable. But you wouldn't hate that shelter while the wind was howling outside. You would be grateful for it. You would recognize that it was the only thing keeping you warm. Your trauma traits are that shelter. Your tendency to shut down is the heavy door you slammed against the cold. Your need to please everyone is the fire you kept burning so no one would have a reason to be angry with you. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of a brilliant, instinctive will to live. The problem arises when the storm passes, but we stay huddled inside the dark shelter, afraid to step out into the sun. We become so used to the architecture of protection that we forget what it's like to breathe open air. We start to think that we are the dark room, rather than the person living inside it. We forget that the walls were only ever meant to be a temporary refuge, a place to catch our breath until the environment was safe again. Transitioning from survival to living requires us to look at these walls, these behaviors we despise in ourselves, and realize they were acts of profound self-love. You loved yourself enough to survive. You cared about your own safety enough to build a fortress. Before we can begin to dismantle the parts of the architecture that no longer serve us, we have to stop viewing them as mistakes. When you catch yourself withdrawing or over-explaining or bracing for a conflict that isn't happening, try to see the builder inside you. Acknowledge the part of you that is still trying so hard to keep you from being hurt. It is only when we stop fighting the walls that we can find the door. We have to learn to say to ourselves, "Thank you for building this for me when I needed it, but it's okay to let a little light in now." You are not the fortress. You are the soul that the fortress was built to protect, and that soul is still there, tucked away safely, waiting for the moment you decide it's safe enough to step outside. There's a specific, quiet kind of grief that comes from comparing who you are right now to an imaginary version of yourself. A version that never experienced hardship, never had their heart broken, and never had to learn how to survive. You carry this ghost of yourself around like a shadow. You look at your life and think, "I should be further along by now," or "I should be able to handle a simple dinner party without feeling exhausted," or "I should be over this already." This word, should, is a heavy, invisible weight. It is a backpack full of lead stones that you strap on every single morning before you even get out of bed. It tells you that your current reality is a failure and that your healing is taking too long. We are often our own harshest critics, standing over our own lives like a demanding foreman. When you find yourself struggling to concentrate or feeling a wave of sadness on a day that was supposed to be good, that voice creeps in. It compares your internal, messy reality to the polished, edited exteriors of everyone else. You think you should be as productive as you were 5 years ago. You think you should be more resilient, which is a word we often use to mean numb or unaffected. But this constant comparison is a form of self-violence. You are punishing yourself for having a natural human reaction to something that was genuinely difficult. Imagine for a moment that you were walking down the street and you tripped, breaking your leg. You would go to the hospital, you would get a cast, and you would use crutches. You wouldn't stand over your hospital bed a week later, screaming at your bone because it hasn't knitted back together yet. You wouldn't tell yourself, "I should be running a marathon today." You would understand that the body has its own clock, its own rhythm for repair. You would give yourself the grace to move slowly. Yet, when it comes to our minds and our hearts, we expect instant results. We get angry at our limp. We feel ashamed that we still need crutches like therapy or boundaries or extra sleep. Why are we so much meaner to our souls than we are to our bodies? The shoulds act like a barrier between you and actual healing. When you are busy judging where you are, you don't have any energy left to actually be where you are. Every time you say, "I should be happy," you are actually telling yourself, "How I feel right now is wrong." You are essentially rejecting yourself. This creates a secondary layer of pain. Not only are you dealing with the original struggle, but you are now also dealing with the shame of having the struggle. It's a heavy cycle that keeps you stuck in a loop of not enough. As Carl Jung once noted, the shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. This applies to your healing journey too. There is no master schedule. There is no correct way to feel after your world has been shaken. Your timeline is yours alone. What if, just for today, you took off the lead boots? What if you looked at your exhaustion, your fear, or your slow progress and said, "This is exactly where I am," and that has to be okay. When we drop the weight of the shoulds, we finally free up our hands to pick up the tools we actually need. We stop looking at the imaginary person who never suffered and start looking at the real person who did. The person who is standing right here, doing their best with what they have left. You aren't behind in life. You are simply on a path that required more stops, more rest, and more repair than you expected. The person you are right now, with all the struggles and the slow days, is not a mistake. They are a person in the middle of a process, and that process deserves your patience, not your judgment. It's common to feel a deep, simmering sense of frustration with your own boundaries, a frustration that often turns into a quiet kind of self-hatred. You might look at yourself in social situations and wonder why you've become someone who says no to almost everything. You see an invitation to a gathering, a chance to meet new people, or even a simple coffee date with an old friend, and your first instinct isn't excitement. It's a cold, hard no. You feel like you're living behind a thick pane of glass, watching the rest of the world touch, laugh, and connect, while you stay safely, miserably tucked away. You start to resent the shield you carry. You hate that you can't just relax or go with the flow, like everyone else seems to do so effortlessly. This shield shows up in so many ways. Maybe it's the way you use humor to deflect a compliment, because being seen feels too vulnerable. Maybe it's the way you've become a perfectionist, overachieving, and performing just to keep people at arm's length so they only see your success and never your struggle. Or maybe it's the physical wall you feel in your chest, a tightness that rises up the moment someone tries to get a little too close to your heart. You look at these behaviors and you think they make you cold or antisocial. You might even tell yourself that you've become a person who is impossible to love. But that shield you're carrying, the one that makes you feel heavy, isolated, and different, was once the only thing standing between you and the world, when the world wasn't kind. Think about what a shield is for. It is a heavy, awkward piece of equipment. No one carries a shield because they want to. They carry it because they are in a place where things are being thrown at them. For a long time, you were in a season where you had to protect yourself. Perhaps you were the one who had to keep the peace, or the one who had to hide your feelings to stay safe, or the one who learned that trusting meant getting hurt. In those moments, your mind fashioned a shield out of whatever it could find: skepticism, distance, silence, or even anger. And it worked. It kept you from shattering. It allowed you to endure. The weight you feel today, that heavy, exhausting burden of being guarded is actually the weight of your own survival. You can't hate the shield without acknowledging that it saved your life. When you resent your boundaries, you are essentially resenting the part of you that fought the hardest to keep you here. It's like being angry at a heavy winter coat because it's too hot to wear in July. The coat isn't a mistake. It was a lifesaver in January. Right now, you might be in a July season of your life where things are safer. And that old coat feels bulky and unnecessary. But you don't have to burn the coat or hate yourself for wearing it. You just have to realize you're allowed to start unbuttoning it. We have to learn to look at our defensive traits with a sense of solemn respect. When you feel yourself pulling away or putting up a wall, try not to meet it with more anger. Instead, try saying to that part of yourself, "I know why you're here. I remember when we needed you." You don't have to love the weight of the shield, but you can respect the job it did. You can recognize that you aren't closed off by choice. You are a person who learned how to survive. As we move forward, the goal isn't to just throw the shield away and stand there unprotected. That feels too terrifying. The goal is to slowly realize that the environment has changed. It's about testing the air, seeing that it's a bit warmer now, and giving yourself permission to set the heavy metal down for just a moment to rest your arms. You are allowed to be tired of carrying it. You are allowed to want to put it down. But please, stop hating yourself for having it. The shield isn't proof that you are broken. It is proof that you are a protector who did a very difficult job for a very long time. It is time to be the one who protects the protector. There is a period in the process of healing that feels less like a breakthrough and more like a wasteland. It's the uncomfortable middle, the space between who you used to be and who you are trying to become. At this stage, you've done the hard work of realizing that your old coping mechanisms aren't working anymore. You can see the walls you've built. You recognize the shoulds for what they are, and you can feel the heavy weight of the shield. But here is the painful part. Even though you know these patterns are hurting you, you haven't yet built the new tools to replace them. You're stuck in a gap. You're aware of your behavior while you're doing it, which often makes it feel even more painful to repeat. This is the stage where self-hatred tends to peak, because you feel like you know better, but you can't do better yet. You might find yourself in the middle of a familiar spiral. Maybe you're pushing someone away or over-explaining yourself again. And a voice in your head is screaming, "Stop doing this. You know what this is." But your body doesn't stop. It's like watching yourself through a window, unable to step inside and change the scene. This isn't because you're weak or because you're failing at healing. It's because your nervous system is still playing an old song, and it takes time to learn a new melody. You are essentially a beginner at being a different version of yourself, and being a beginner is always messy. This midpoint can feel incredibly lonely. You might look around and feel like everyone else has it figured out, or that you've been healing for so long that you should be fixed by now. But healing isn't a straight line that goes up. It's a spiral. You will pass the same landmarks of fear and doubt over and over again. But each time, you are passing them with a little more perspective. Carl Jung observed that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. He didn't say it was the most beautiful thing, or the most peaceful, or the easiest. He said it was the most terrifying. Because to accept yourself completely means accepting this awkward, middle version of you. It means accepting the person who knows they are stuck, but doesn't quite know how to get out yet. We tend to want to skip the middle. We want to go straight from the aha moment of realization to the happily ever after of peace. But the middle is where the actual transformation happens. It's in the frustration, the repetition, and the small, failed attempts that your brain is actually rewiring itself. If you were building a house, you wouldn't get angry at the frame for not having a roof yet. You would understand that the frame is a necessary, albeit skeletal and drafty, part of the process. Right now, you are in your frame stage. You are open to the elements. You feel unfinished, and you feel vulnerable. When the self-hatred rises up in this wasteland, try to remember that your awareness is actually the greatest tool you have. The fact that you can feel the discomfort of your old patterns is proof that you are no longer the person who was blinded by them. You have already moved. You have already changed. You are just waiting for your actions to catch up with your heart. Accepting that you are currently in pieces is the only way to eventually put them back together in a way that fits the person you want to be. You cannot build a new life while you are busy cursing the materials you have to work with. This midpoint requires a radical, almost impossible kind of patience. It's about standing in the middle of that wasteland and saying, I don't like it here, and I don't feel like myself yet, but I am willing to stay until the path becomes clear. You aren't lost. You are just in the thick of the forest, and the only way out is to keep walking, even when your legs feel heavy and the scenery hasn't changed in miles. Trust the process of the middle. It is the most honest place you will ever be. We have to stop trying to get back to the person we were before things got hard. This is perhaps the most painful part of the entire journey. The realization that the version of you who existed before the trauma, before the loss, or before the change is no longer there. For a long time, you might have treated your healing like a recovery mission, as if you were searching for a lost child in the woods, hoping that if you just worked hard enough or searched long enough, you could find that old self and step back into their skin. You want that version of you who trusted without hesitation, who slept without worry, and who looked at the future with a simple, uncomplicated joy. But that person is gone, and as harsh as it sounds, that is okay. Trying to return to a previous version of yourself is like trying to force a plant back into the tiny shell of a seed. It's not just difficult, it's impossible. Growth only moves in one direction, The reason you can't fit back into that old self isn't because you're broken. It's because you've grown too large for that old container. You have seen things, felt things, and survived things that the old you could never have imagined. You have a depth now that was bought at a very high price, but it is yours. To keep mourning the ghost of who you used to be is to remain in a state of permanent exile from the person you are right now. It keeps you from ever truly inhabiting your current life because you're always looking over your shoulder at a memory. There is a specific kind of cruelty in the way we compare our current, struggling selves to that idealized past self. We say things like, "I used to be so much more fun," or "I used to be so much more capable." But that past self didn't have to carry what you are carrying. They didn't have to navigate the storms you've navigated. It's an unfair comparison. It's like comparing someone walking unencumbered to someone carrying a heavy pack uphill and wondering why the person with the pack is moving more slowly. The goal of this journey isn't to undo the change. It's to integrate it. You aren't damaged goods that need to be refurbished to look like new. You are more like a piece of art that has been layered over time. You are a more complex, nuanced, and profound version of yourself. You have perspectives, depths of empathy, and a quiet, steely resilience that the old you simply didn't have. That younger version of you was beautiful, yes, but they were also untested. The person standing here today has been through the fire and stayed. Giving up the ghost means allowing yourself to finally grieve that old version of you. It's okay to cry for the person who didn't know what heartbreak felt like. It's okay to miss that innocence. But after the grief, there has to be a letting go. You have to stop holding your current self up to the light of a past that no longer exists. When you stop mourning the ghost, you finally have the energy to look at the person who is actually standing in front of you. You find that this person, the new you, has a different kind of beauty. It's a beauty that comes from being reconstructed. It's a beauty that knows how to survive. When you finally stop trying to get back, you can start going forward. You can start asking what this version of you needs. What does a person who has survived so much need to feel safe today? What kind of life does this version of you want to build? You are not a lesser version of who you were. You are the evolution of that person. And the person you are becoming has the potential to be more authentic and grounded than the one you lost. Let the ghost go. They served their purpose, and now it is time to live for the person who is actually here. Listen closely to the way you talk to yourself when the lights go out, or when you make a small, human mistake in the middle of a busy day. What does that voice sound like? For many of us, the internal dialogue we carry isn't the voice of a friend or a mentor. Instead, it's the voice of the very thing that hurt us. We have a tendency to internalize the harshness we experienced from the world and turn it inward, as if by being our own most brutal critic, we can somehow prevent anyone else from hurting us first. We think that if we are hard enough, loud enough, and mean enough to ourselves, we will eventually correct our flaws and become a person who is finally better. But you cannot shame yourself into a version of yourself that you love. It's like trying to make a flower grow by screaming at it, or trying to heal a wound by picking at it every time it starts to close. When you drop a glass, or forget an appointment, or find yourself unable to get out of bed, pay attention to the words that rise up. Do you say, "I'm so stupid. I'm such a mess," or "Why can't I just be normal?" This is the language of the dark. It is a vocabulary built on the belief that you are fundamentally broken. We use these words because they feel familiar. And sometimes they feel like the only way to stay in control. If we punish ourselves first, the world's judgment won't sting as much. Or so we tell ourselves. But all we are doing is reinforcing the walls of the prison. As Carl Jung once noted, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you cannot become who you truly are if you are constantly speaking to yourself in a language of rejection. We have to change the internal vocabulary. But that change starts with a very quiet, very difficult shift in perspective. Instead of asking, "Why am I so broken?" try asking, "What is this part of me trying to protect me from?" When you feel that surge of self-criticism, try to pause and realize that the voice is often just a very scared, very tired part of you that thinks it has to be perfect to be safe. If you saw a child crying because they were overwhelmed, you wouldn't tell them they were pathetic or useless. You would ask them what they needed. You would offer them a hand. Why is it that we deny ourselves the very same grace we would give to a complete stranger? Healing requires us to learn a new language, a language of reconciliation. It's moving from "I'm a failure" to "I am having a really hard time right now." It's moving from "I hate how I act" to "I see that I'm feeling defensive, and I wonder why." This isn't about positive thinking in a shallow way. It's about accuracy. It's about looking at your life and describing it with the truth of a compassionate observer rather than the bias of an executioner. The language of the dark keeps us stuck in the past, repeating the same stories of our own inadequacy. But a language of grounded, gentle reality allows for the possibility of change. It creates a space where you can actually breathe. Tonight, when that voice starts to whisper all the ways you didn't measure up, try to interrupt it. Even if you don't believe the kinder words yet, say them anyway. Tell yourself, "I am doing the best I can with the energy I have." Tell yourself, "It makes sense that I'm tired." Every time you replace a word of shame with a wuss of understanding, you are performing a small act of rescue. You are teaching your nervous system that it no longer has to live in a state of constant attack from within. You are building a home for yourself out of better words. And slowly, the dark won't feel quite so heavy. The parts of yourself that you have learned to hate, the hyper-vigilance that keeps you up at night, the skepticism that makes it hard to trust a compliment, or the intensity that feels like it's too much for other people, are often just strengths that have been turned up too high. For a long time, you've probably looked at these traits as your greatest weaknesses. You see them as the shadow parts of your personality, the things you wish you could cut out and throw away so you could finally be normal. But there is a secret hidden in that shadow. These traits are actually the very tools that helped you survive. They aren't your enemies. They are your protectors that just don't know the war is over yet. Think about your hyper-vigilance. You might despise it because it makes you jumpy, or because you can never truly relax at a party. But if you look at it through a lens of compassion, you'll see it's actually an incredible, finely tuned ability to observe details. It means you are deeply intuitive. You can read a room in seconds. You can feel the shift in someone's mood before they even speak. That is a gift of awareness. Your skepticism? That isn't just being negative. It's a sharp, analytical mind that was developed to protect you from being deceived. Your intensity? That isn't being dramatic. It is a capacity for deep, profound passion and a heart that feels things with a level of honesty that most people are afraid of. As Carl Jung suggested, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And the same is true for the things that irritate us about our own behavior. These irritating traits are actually clues. They are like signal flares pointing toward the parts of you that need attention, balance, and, most importantly, employment in a new way. When a trait is born out of trauma, it's like a tool being used for the wrong job. You were using a hammer to try and fix a glass window because that's all you had at the time. Now that you're safer, you don't have to throw the hammer away. You just have to learn how to use it to build something new. Recognizing the strength in your shadow means moving from a place of judgment to a place of recalibration. It's about looking at your need for control and realizing it's actually a talent for organization and leadership that just needs to be dialed back so it doesn't stifle your joy. It's about looking at your tendency to withdraw and seeing it as a necessary capacity for deep reflection and self-reliance. You aren't trying to get rid of these parts of yourself. You are trying to give them a new job description. You are taking the raw energy of your survival and turning it into the fuel for your growth. This shift changes everything. When you stop seeing yourself as a collection of flaws and start seeing yourself as a collection of powerful tools, the self-hatred begins to lose its grip. You realize that you don't have to be fixed because you aren't a broken machine. You are a complex human being with a powerful internal system that has been working overtime. The goal is to bring these shadow parts into the light, not to punish them, but to thank them and then give them a rest. You can say to your hyper-vigilance, "Thank you for watching the door for so long, but I've got a lock on it now." You can take a break. When you acknowledge the strength in the shadow, you stop fighting a civil war within yourself. You begin to integrate these parts, realizing that the very things that made you different are the things that make you resilient. Your shadow isn't a dark place where you are lost. It's a reservoir of strength that you are finally learning how to use with grace. Healing doesn't happen in a giant, cinematic epiphany. It doesn't usually arrive with a clap of thunder or a sudden, permanent shift where everything becomes easy. Instead, it happens in the quiet, almost invisible moments when you decide to be slightly less mean to yourself. It is a series of tiny, humble choices that build a bridge back to your own heart. We often wait for a big sign that we are okay, but the real work, the most profound work, is found in the smallest acts of reconciliation. It's the moment you realize you're starting to spiral into a familiar pit of shame, and instead of jumping in, you pause and say, "Okay, I'm overwhelmed right now, and that makes sense," instead of saying, "I'm losing it again." These acts are so small, they are easy to miss. It is choosing to take one slow, conscious breath before responding to a stressful email that would have normally sent you into a defensive panic. It's the decision to buy the comfortable chair or the soft blanket, not because you're being indulgent, but because you finally, quietly, believe that you deserve to be comfortable in your own space. It's the act of feeding yourself a real meal when you're tired, rather than just surviving on scraps, because you recognize that your body is a vessel that deserves care. These aren't just chores or self-care trends. They are peace offerings. They are messages you are sending to your nervous system, telling it that the environment is no longer hostile. As Carl Jung beautifully put it, the smallest thing with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest thing without it. When you are navigating the aftermath of change or trauma, a small thing like forgiving yourself for being tired is incredibly meaningful. It is a brick you use to build a new house. You don't have to love the whole house yet. You don't even have to know what the finished building will look like. You just have to be willing to lay one brick today. And maybe tomorrow, you'll lay another. Reconciliation is the process of slowly convincing yourself that you are no longer your own enemy. Think about a relationship you've had where trust was broken. You wouldn't expect it to be fixed by one bouquet of flowers. You would look for the small, consistent actions that prove things are different now. You are in that same process with yourself. Your trust in your own safety and your own worthiness has been shaken. You cannot fix that with one grand gesture. You fix it by showing up for yourself in the tiny ways. It's staying hydrated. It's letting yourself cry for 5 minutes without judging the tears. It's saying no to a commitment that feels like too much. And then, this is the hard part, not punishing yourself for saying no. These moments of grace are like drops of water on a stone. One drop doesn't seem to do much, but over time, they change the shape of the rock. Every time you choose understanding over judgment, you are wearing down the edges of your self-hatred. You are creating a new normal, where you are a person who is on your own side. You are moving from a state of internal war to a state of internal truce. Stop looking for the finish line and start looking for the next small act of kindness you can offer yourself. Maybe it's just putting your phone away so your mind can rest. Maybe it's acknowledging that you did something well today, even if that something was just getting through the afternoon. These are the victories that count. They are the quiet evidence that you are coming home to yourself. You are not fixing a broken person. You are reconciling with a person who has been through enough. And that reconciliation starts with a single, gentle step. Eventually, the goal of this long, winding journey is to look at that stranger in the mirror, the one with the guarded eyes and the weary heart, and realize they are a hero. Not the kind of hero you see in a blockbuster movie, wrapped in a cape and standing tall without a scratch. I'm talking about the real kind of hero, the kind who stayed when it was hard, who kept breathing when the air felt thin, and who protected you when no one else would. To stop hating the person trauma created, you have to realize that this person is the very reason you are still here to have this conversation. You are a survivor of your own history, and that is a title that should be worn with a profound sense of honor. We spend so much time wishing we could erase our scars, both the visible ones and the ones tucked deep inside our spirits. We look at our defensiveness, our fears, and our complicated ways of moving through the world as things to be fixed. But what if we saw them as medals of honor? What if you realized that the part of you that is a bit much or too sensitive is actually the part of you that was strong enough to endure the unthinkable? You aren't damaged goods. You are a masterpiece of resilience. You are a living testament to the fact that the human spirit can be bent, stretched, and pressed. But it is incredibly difficult to break. Loving the person who survived means offering yourself the same radical grace you would give to someone you love who had just walked through a fire. You wouldn't expect them to be perfect. You would be amazed that they were standing. You would wrap them in a blanket, give them a place to rest, and tell them over and over again how proud you are of them. It is time to do that for yourself. It is time to look at the version of you that did the wrong things to stay safe and say, I understand. Thank you for doing what you had to do. As we reach the end of this reflection, remember that loving who you are now isn't about being cured or reaching a state of constant happiness. It is about a fundamental shift in loyalty. It is deciding that from this day forward, you are done being your own adversary. You are choosing to be the person who holds your own hand. Carl Jung reminded us that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is a person who has been tested and has remained. You may still have days where the shield feels heavy. You may still have moments where the shoulds whisper in your ear or the mirror feels unfamiliar. But on those days, I want you to remember this. You are the one who made it. You are the one who didn't give up on the possibility of a better day. That version of you, the scarred, slightly guarded, incredibly resilient person standing here right now, is someone deeply worthy of your respect, your grace, and eventually your deepest love. You don't have to be the person you were before to be a person who is whole. You are whole right now, exactly as you are, because you are the one who survived. And that is more than enough. If there is one thing to take away from this journey, it's that healing is not a destination you arrive at, but a relationship you build. We often think of recovery as a way to get rid of the parts of ourselves that feel broken. But the deeper truth is that those parts don't need to be discarded. They need to be invited back in. The hardness, the walls, and the weariness were all just different ways your soul tried to say, "I want to live." You are allowed to move slowly. You are allowed to have days where you still feel like a stranger to yourself. But even on those days, try to remember that you are no longer in the storm. The architecture you built to survive is still standing. But the door is unlocked now. You can choose when to step out and when to retreat. You are the architect, not the prisoner. As you move forward, let your self-discovery be grounded in the reality of your own strength. You have survived the worst of your days, and you have done so with a quiet, persistent courage that most people will never see. That courage is your foundation. It's okay if the new you feels a little fragile at first. New growth always is, but it is real, and it is yours. Be patient with the person you are becoming. They have been through a lot to get here. Give yourself permission to breathe, to rest, and to finally, slowly, start to like the person who stayed. You aren't just starting over. You are starting with a depth and a resilience that only a survivor can know. The mirror isn't a reminder of what was lost. It's a reflection of everything that remains. And what remains is beautiful.